بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اتحاد الأطباء الألماني اليمني يرحب بكم جميعا للقاء هذا، وشهر مبارك عليكم جميعا، حفظكم الله تعالى و من الجائحة وتقبل منكم الطاعات. طبعا عندنا اليوم البروفيسور تيمو أولريش، هو رجل معروف في ألمانيا في علم الفيروسات، ومن جامعة أكون في مدينة برلين، وإن شاء الله تعالى سيلقي محاضرته باللغة الإنجليزية. والأخ العزيز المعروف للجميع والأشر عن فكري دريب هو سيقدم المحاضرة ستكون عن الطفرات وعن اللقاحات. فليتفضل أخ فكري. اللقاء سيتم تسجيله لمعلوماتكم، وإن شاء الله تعالى أعتقد بتستمر أسبوع حتى ينزل هذا اللقاء أيضا كرابط على الصفحة الرسمية للاتحاد. شكرا جزيلا. تفضل أخ فكري وبعدها قدم الأخ تيمو.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hamoud, and hello for everybody. We say Ramadan Kareem for all. Today we'll have Professor Dr. Timo Ulrichs, the head of the International Institute of Research in Akon University, to talk about the virus and the mutations. I will not be long then. I'll give the floor for Dr. Timo to start. Timo, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Hamoud, and thank you, Fikri. I will give you a short presentation on the different variants of the coronavirus and the correlation to our vaccine programs and what is now necessary to think about and how we can prepare both globally and locally to keep up with the dynamics. This is a real competition between the virus and us. Again, I'm very sorry for the delay, for the time delay. So I had to give another interview to the Westdeutscher Rundfunk, and this was originally scheduled a couple of minutes before, and now it was postponed. So I'm very sorry. I will show you some slides, and afterwards we can go into the discussion and see how different aspects of vaccination issues and of how the dynamic is between the virus and the host community, namely us all, and then we can also base this discussion on the slides or also extrapolate a bit from that. So I will just share my screen, and now you should see. Please tell me if you. And it is about just some things that are interesting right nowadays. In this time where we face a third wave in Germany and in Europe, but in some other regions, well, we already have the fourth, even the fifth wave, depending on the countermeasures and easing of these measures in the particular decisions of the different governments. And so if you look, and I just of Germany, if you look at epidemiology, then you see that we are in the midst of the third wave. We had a very small then in fall and autumn, which was already forecast by many of the epidemiologists. When it came, it was not really taken seriously by many political decision makers. Now that we had this second wave, the lockdown measures were given with a certain delay, time delay, and then with the easing in the beginning of this year, it was too much, and now we have a third wave. And this is not the actual curve, but it is really going into this direction that we really have to face very high infection numbers. So if you have, and this is the hypothesis in combining epidemiological data with the emergence of new variants, if you have a high load of circulating viruses, then you have a higher chance that these viruses get mutations in their replication processes, then the result be two combinations, these different mutations with viable virus variants, and they will hit us in the midst of this whole epidemiological situation.
Timo, Entschuldigung,
So,
der Ton ist ein bisschen undeutlich. Kannst du vielleicht ein bisschen dichter kommen zum Mikrofon oder wie auch immer?
Ich komme dichter, ja, klar. Okay, sorry for that. If you look at different curves of newly infected rates here in Europe, you see the kingdom after this first wave in April of last year, there was a second wave in the United Kingdom, then a third wave, and even now with the vaccination campaign, they had an increasing virus spread situation. And other countries were even not so good of this whole situation, like the Czech Republic with very high numbers per 100,000 of the inhabitants. And in Germany, we also second wave, and now if you want to have a closer, of course, the newly infected rates is not all. So we also have to look at the reproduction number, which is depicted here. So if it is above 1.0, then there is an increase of virus spread of infections. And if it is below 0, then there is a decrease of the whole wave, for example. And we see also the death toll. And if you look at that, also different countries, the United Kingdom did not get through the first wave very well, because the whole virus and COVID-19 was considered to be not so severe. And then in this second wave, third wave scenario, which we are still in, we had much higher numbers also of people dying from or with the coronavirus, even in Germany. And if you look at this, then you can really distinguish different waves from that. And this is the final result of all of our activities to contain the virus, of the virus activity, the dynamics of spread, and the interaction between the virus replication rate and the local individual immune system. So if we compare the really more clear ways of death from the coronavirus.
Entschuldigung, Timo, darf ich? Entschuldigung, Timo.
Ja.
Entschuldigung, Timo, du bist ganz schlecht zu verstehen. Ja. Vielleicht machst du mal dein Foto aus, dann deine Kamera aus, dann, dass wir nur die Bildschirmpräsentation sehen. Ich glaube, dann ist der Ton vielleicht auch besser.
Das möchte auch. Ist es jetzt besser? Ich komme dann auch ein bisschen näher ran vielleicht.
Ja, das ist viel besser. Danke schön. Ja, danke. Mhm.
Alles klar. Ihr müsst the smaller second wave. Now there is already the emergence of a third wave of death toll from the corona pandemic. You compare that with a diagram of the mortality of the pandemic flu, also called the Spanish flu in 1918, and so more than 100 years ago. And you see that also a smaller first wave was followed by a bigger world regions, and especially in India, there was also kind of a globalization from this pandemic influenza virus, H1N1, and this was really a tremendous death toll that all of the whole world population had to pay to this pandemic. We see a more or less similar pattern right now. So the death rates are really a good way to really judge how the dynamics of the whole pandemic is. And now our instruments of social distancing and wearing face masks and so on is already, of course, helpful. But to end the pandemic, we have in our hands teams that were, by the way, not available 100 years ago to end the Spanish flu. There was only an end because of the whole infection wave swept over the whole 3 waves, and then people either died from infection and disease or got an immunization. And this is what we, of course, want to avoid by a huge vaccination campaign, the biggest campaign ever to be undertaken to contain a newly emerged pathogen. So one side aspect to our discussion here tonight is who should be vaccinated first. So in Germany, it was decided to have the high-risk population get the vaccination first in order to decrease the death toll among these very high-risk population. And the elderly and people with some severe underlying diseases, chronic diseases, were vaccinated in the first round, second round, and indeed we saw a very strong decrease in death from COVID-19 among the people older than 80 years. And now we see in the third wave, we see an increase of people of COVID-19 patients suffering from severe clinical causes, which are younger than 70 years old. And this is really worrying because the intensive care units are now more or less occupied. And this means that these people also spend more time at the ICU because they have a higher chance to survive or at least to fight with the virus replication within the own organism. So this is what we have to keep in mind, speaking about a protecting vaccine campaign. We also look at the capacities of the intensive care units throughout the country. And we see that the COVID-19 patients within German hospitals had a peak in the second wave and is now on an increase here. So we see a similar peak as during the second wave. And we have the real problem right now. So we are very close to an overwhelming situation, so that the physicians have to do a triage, so to decide which patient will be treated according to the recommendations and which patient will not. This is really a very severe. In order to come closer to how this whole situation is, we also can look at the overall death rate or the crude mortality rate and compare it with the average situation of dying through different time periods of a year. And here you see the typical curve in gray, when and how people die in Germany, but because of different reasons. So here, for example, you have the seasonal influenza death toll each year. And here you have different bumps because of a heat wave. And as you know, because of climate change, we have heat waves more and more often during summer times, and people suffer, and the elderly have a higher risk of dying from the consequences of these heat waves. And in red, you see the surplus of death caused by the corona pandemic. And you see here, this is the first wave death, so additional death individuals caused by the first wave. Here we had a heat wave in the year 2020. And then you have this death toll here, the surplus caused by the second wave. And now we again have another peak to be built up by the third wave. So this is also what you could use as an indicator of how a population or a country go through the pandemic. And you can, of course, minimize the death toll by a lockdown and followed by a complete vaccination campaign in order to get immunization within the population. So this would function normally, if we only had one very stable enemy, which we can characterize and against whom we can develop a functioning vaccine. We have several vaccine candidates which prove to be very highly efficient and effective in the clinical testing phases. And now we see that because of the fact that we had a very huge amount of viruses circulating, we had the emergence of new variants of this virus. So the British variant, the South African, and the Brazilian variant. And in gray, you see the total amount, 100% of the wild type or old variants. And in Germany, the British variant now replaces more and more the wild type ones. And the other ones are to be neglected, but they are also present, which also should worry us. You can also depict it in a different picture. You see decreasing second wave in Germany, and at the same time the emergence of the increasing percentages of the new UK variant B.1.1.7. And you see, without this new variant, the emergence of the wild type would have been decreasing much more tremendously. And this new variant contributed at least a bit to the re-increase in the building up of the third wave. So we have a new dynamic. We have a higher activity of spread and a higher activity of successful infections, followed by COVID-19 in at least a certain part of the population. This is what we have in days in Germany, but also in many other countries. And we have to consider how to deal with that. Also concerning lockdown measures, on the other hand, to readjust our vaccine strategies. So this is what we have to discuss. And here is what is still the question, how this new variants can be suppressed or even furthered in days. So one hypothesis is, and this is what I started out with, we have a high prevalence of circulating viruses, and novel variants. This is rather clear, and the higher the total amount of circulating viruses is, the higher is that you have spontaneous mutations, and a new combination of these spontaneous mutations, so mutations that occur by chance, can evolve or can result in the formation of new and more aggressive variants. This is one thing. The other thing is, or the other hypothesis is that some immune-compromised infected individuals with a prolongated COVID-19 clinical course could serve as a, let's say, an organism, a host organism in which the still replicating virus, coronavirus, can learn from the immune defense and then can adapt to the new situation and can escape from the antibody production and the other countermeasures of the immune system, and this will result in new variants. Also, weak immunization and vaccination could also result in this immune escape variant, so-called. However, if you just think about how what the conditions or the preconditions of such a immune escape situation should be, this is a very rare situation. Much more likely is that we have a high prevalence of virus load throughout the world, especially in India or in other countries highly affected by the virus. And this results in spontaneous mutations and new variants. Some publications are out also proving this immune escape situation could be observed in different individuals. However, this is not a general observation and not contributing to an epidemiological measurable situation. So what to do? Here we have an overview. This is a wild virus, and here we have the different variants that are very well established. In first emerged in the United Kingdom, South Africa, Brazil. We have a number of mutations that are now put together to variant, and this binding domain of the spike protein and on the surface, so this here, is a bit altered, and this could result in a more efficient, perhaps not transmission, but a more efficient adherence to the epithelial cells in the throat, and a reduced antibody binding and immune against these new variants. And this is what we see in science, also proven by clinical tested in different groups, placebo and vaccine. At the same time, this new South African emerged, and there could be some of the vaccine candidates
Timo, man versteht dich wieder nicht.
for example, in
Hallo, Timo?
Timo, hallo?
vielleicht wird besser, wenn er rauskommt und wiederkommt. تيمو خرج وسيرجع من جديد ان شاء الله.
Lass es. I'm back. I can continue if you like.
Yes,
Yeah?
yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Yes, you can.
I'm to finishing up. So just to show how this variant can be depicted and
The
these
slide is not here.
binding domains. Oh, you cannot see the slide?
No.
You cannot see the slide. I will restart the presentation. Okay. Hold on a second. I will share my screen.
Aber der Ton ist jetzt sehr gut.
Jetzt ja.
Das freut mich. Ich bin aber trotzdem immer noch ganz dicht am Mikro. So, jetzt geht's wieder mit der Präsentation.
Ja. Ja. Aber also du kannst aber nur auf Präsentationsmodus gehen, ne?
Just to illustrate. Wie bitte?
Auf Präsentationsmodus. Wir sehen jetzt alle Folien. Auch, ja, genau. So, Dankeschön.
Jetzt ist der Präsentationsmodus, Gabi?
Ja, perfekt, danke.
Sehr gut. This is already my last slide. So just to show you that there can be an alteration of the surface structure of this spike protein, and this results in a better binding to the epithelial cells in the throat and a less efficient binding of the antibodies produced by vaccination. And if you have a vaccine that is that has been derived to the original spike protein, you can see with the alterations that the binding efficiency is not so good. So this is how this variant situation occurs. And now we have this competition situation. So we have to be fast enough vaccinating throughout the world to reduce considerably the amount of circulating viruses in order to reduce the risk of new variants. So if you just look at the surface structure here, there can be even more and much more alterations so that it looks completely different and is even more efficient in adhere to the surface of epithelial cells. And so this is the situation we are in. Luckily, we have very efficient vaccines. So we did not expect at the beginning of the pandemic that we would be so fast with that, but now we have them, and we should really administer them and use them as a tool, as an instrument to reduce the virus loads. This should be our first aim, to vaccinate as fast as possible, and not only in the rich countries like Germany, but also in many other regions, in order to reduce the risk of new variants. Perhaps we are already too late if you look at India. We have some more of these, at least one more variant that emerged, and we have to see how we deal. It is, of course, difficult to vaccinate 1.3 billion people in a country in comparison to 83 million in Germany. But at least what we can say even right now, we have enough vaccine doses for all people living on Earth. So we just have to distribute them. And this is what should be facilitated by the initiative of COVAX, so that considerable amounts of vaccine dosages should be transferred to the countries with an increasing risk of corona spread. And this should be done very fast. And even now, and not after having completed the complete vaccination campaign in a rich country like Germany. This is where we are right now. And if we discuss the potential side effects of different vaccines and compare it with this overall risk of the emergence of new variants, then we can say, well, this is really neglectable. We have the situation that only in very, very rare cases you have these thrombotic events associated with a thrombocytopenia. And this is comparable to another disease where this thrombocytopenia is elicited by heparin. So we know what to do. So the clinical counteracting is very well described. You can give antibodies against this, and you can do an anticoagulation. You just have to pay attention. So this is also something that, of course, you have to calculate with some severe side effects in rare situations, in rare cases. But this is what we can manage, and we have to see what is the higher risk, and the higher risk is to die from COVID-19 rather than to have this very severe but very rare event of this thrombosis. This is where we are right now, and we have to rely on what we have as vaccine candidates, including the one from AstraZeneca, and also in comparison to the other things. So the risk-benefit ratio for all vaccines is excellent on the side of the benefit for the individual as well as the benefit for the whole population. I would like to end here and just step in, if you like, into the discussion so that we can also, let's say, discuss some more questions on variants and vaccines, also in particular situations and regions, Yemen, for example, and how there are perhaps other obstacles than the ones that I just pointed out. Thank you very much for your attention. I stop the slides, and we are all here back in the audience.
Thank you very much, Timo, for this interesting presentation. We can open the floor for the question from the college and participants. Miriam, she wants to ask. Please, Miriam.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and thanks, Timo, for the presentation. I just didn't, I'm not clear about the last slide, maybe because I don't read Germany. I'm not very good in that. So I didn't really get how the vaccine, the current vaccine, is dealing with the variants, and what you would do to improve the vaccine to get it better. Would it be possible to explore that little bit more, please?
Timo, are you with us?
Timo, hast du gehört? Der ist weg.
They're from different countries. So one study was performed in Israel. They already have like more than 60% of their population vaccinated. And one study showed that the British variant was present in the already vaccinated ones 8 times more than in the non-vaccinated ones. So this is where they deducted from that perhaps vaccination is not so good in terms of variants. But if you look a bit closer to the study, then it was 8 cases to 1 case. And this means that it was like a pre-publication thing. So the number of people in the different groups that was far too small. And this is really a thing that we have during this pandemic, that too early and without peer review, you have data published. It's very really have to look careful at these different data. So we cannot deduct from that new variants break through this vaccine protection, and you cannot deduct that the different vaccines will not also cover the individuals vaccinated so that they are also secure against, for example, the British variant. So, but what we can do, this was your question. Of course, first of all, collect data, observe the whole situation, be ready to also with public health measures to contain the new spread of new variants. This is what we have to do despite lockdown measures and so on, but also to be ready to look closer to the spike protein and the alterations there, and to potentially react in redesigning the vaccines. This could be the case if you have even more alterations in the different domains of the spike protein, so that we come up with a new vaccine. It's very easy for an mRNA-based vaccine to just rewrite the mRNA and produce this as a new vaccine. Should also be easy and fast to get through all of these processes to get it onto the market, and then revaccinate if necessary. This could be the case perhaps in a year or so, but I'm very confident that the already existing vaccines on the market will save us from the pandemic potential of the coronavirus for years.
Thank you, Timo. Shaif, do you عندك سؤال؟ No. Okay.
السلام عليكم. السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
رمضان كريم. دكتور فكري، عاقد على الشكر طبعا. المحاضرة الأولى كنت الغائب الحاضر، واليوم الحاضر فينا، والدكتور تيمو والإخوة جميعا الموجودين. الشكر لمحبي الإنسانية مني لكم من داخل نقد الجماعي الجمهورية اليمنية إلى ألمانيا حيثما أنتم. إلى الآن يا دكتور فكري، من يوم تواصلت معك في الحالة حق المايكازن إلى الآن 12 حالة عدد الوفيات عندنا في السبرة، في مديرية السبرة. الذي ألاحظ أنا في الحالة هذه كلهم كبار سن فعلا عندهم أمراض مزمنة. العامل المشترك فيهم إنه نفس الإصابة، يعني نفس الإصابة والأعراض. كان من قبل فقدان الشم والطعم، هذا الذي احنا مرينا فيه، لكن هذه الحالات الذي نشوفها أنا إلى أمس، آخر حالة أمس الليل، امرأة في 60 سنة طبعا، عندها ضغط وسكر، بداية العرض حقها الذي يشعر بالاختناق، وما بعدين اللي كان لها الكب وما إلى ذلك، ودخلت للعناية، ما جلست حتى يومين إلى 3 أيام حتى انتهت، وبالآخر يقولوا أيضا كان في عندها جلطة. أنا أشوف إنه الجلطات عامل مشترك بين الكل. هل هذا برضه ناتج عن كوفيد؟ هذا السؤال الأول. السؤال الثاني، الجائحة الثالثة، هل نتوقع إنه في جائحة ثالثة وبتكون بأعراض أخرى مختلفة؟ شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا جزيلا. بترجم تيمو. Timo, I will translate for you. Sharif is talking about the situation in his district in Sabra in Eb Governorate in Yemen. He said that there is many cases, and until now they have 12 dead cases. He said they found that the stroke is the main cause of death with all these cases. Is that common for all COVID cases, or it's specific there? The second question he asked about the third wave, because in Yemen now is in the second wave, and he said, is there a third wave in Yemen is coming, and is it will be the same manner as now, or will be different?
Okay, so yeah, this is of course not a mandatory follow-up of events that you have a third wave after a second. It very much depends on the decision-making of the government. You could have even avoided a second wave. Even in Germany, this could have been the case if there were or had been a very severe and early counteracting. But this is what we did not have. So we had a second wave because of some deficits in counteracting the spread of the virus. So this is not a natural law that you have 3 waves, 4 waves in a typical pandemic. However, it can happen. And let's say a more general observation is that there is a first spread of the virus in a first wave. And the first wave could happen in early regions of viral spread, like in Europe. And some other regions like Australia or Latin America, they are just spared from any viral spread in the first round, but then hit perhaps even harder. But if there are some counteracting measures that are really effective, for example, in New Zealand or even now in Australia, you have no waves. So this is what we have as a, let's say, general observation on this. If you are too loose with your counteracting measures, then or too easy, then you can even have a 5th wave and so on. And if the population will not adhere to the different countermeasures like lockdown, then of course there's a higher risk of spread and re-increase in the sense of a wave. I'm not sure whether I completely understood the first part of the question with the strokes as events in the governorate. This is the main reason of death, as I understood it. And now we also have COVID-19, and perhaps not so much difference in comparison to the times in pre-corona pandemic times. So of course, it very much depends on the demographic situation to die from COVID-19. The older a population is, the higher the risk is that you have a real death curve, like I showed you for Germany. So the average age in Germany is like 40, 45 years. and in Yemen and in many other countries, it is much, much younger. And the younger population is lower the risk is people will die from COVID-19. However, there is a risk of also for the young, which we observe right now in Germany, because the elderly are vaccinated and we have a strong viral spread, a very high dynamic. And now we see that the spread results also in COVID-19 causes of the younger ones, which are not so likely, but they also occur. And in our ICUs, we see much younger patients right now.
Okay, let me translate in Arabic. بالنسبة للسؤال المتعلق بالموجة الثالثة، طبعا هو ليس شرطا أنه يكون هناك موجة ثالثة. يعتمد هذا على الإجراءات الوقائية والحد من انتشار الفيروس. طبعا في بعض الدول نجحت في منع حدوث الموجة الثانية أو الثالثة، لكن طبعا احنا نعرف في اليمن قد يكون هذا صعب، ووجدنا أنه الموجة الثانية يعني جاءتنا تقريبا بحلول العام، بعد ما كان برضو الموجة الأولى انتشرت بشكل يعني بدون أي إجراءات احترازية، والثانية الآن طبعا تمشي بنفس النمط. واحتمال تكون في موجة ثالثة واحتمال ما تكونش في موجة ثالثة، ما هو الشرط إنه يكون في موجات، يعني حتى إنه تم الالتزام أو الأخذ الإجراءات الاحترازية. بالنسبة لتكون الجلطات، طبعا معروف من ضمن الكوفيد يسبب الجلطات، وكمان واحد من العلاجات أو البروتوكولات إنه يضاف بعض مضادات التجلط للمرضى، خاصة الذي في حالتهم حادة. لكن هنا وجدنا انه تكلم دكتور تيمو انه غالبا يكون هذا بين الحالات الكبيره في السن، وتكون طبعا في اليمن كبار في السن عندنا قليل مقارنه باوروبا والمانيا، ولكن هم وجدوا انه مع انتشار التلقيحات خاصه بين كبار السن انه الحالات اللي في الاي سي يو الآن ليست بين كبار السن، بل الأعمار أقل من ما كان عليه، فهنا يدل على مدى كفاءة التلقيح. هذا باختصار. Thank you. هل هناك في سؤال آخر من الزملاء المشاركين؟
Hi. Yeah, I just have a question. Maybe it's like a little bit in advance, but like first things, thank you for Timo, Dr. Timo, for his lecture. And I have this question, like, how do you see the future scenario for this virus if you compare it to the Spanish flu, like after 3-4 years?
Oh, you mean after the pandemic? Yeah. So,
like, how is the scenario will be like in the future? Like if you compare like that same scenario to the Spanish flu, we will have this flu. Like, so how will it be like after 3-4 years from now?
Yeah. So this is a very important question because, of course, we would like to get rid of these cycles of lockdown and easing and so on, and we would like to overcome this whole situation and to end up in a more normal life as we had before the pandemic. And the chances for this are very good. So if you look at different countries like Great Britain, the UK, how they already proceeded with the vaccination campaign, they can already start the easing process of getting out of this last lockdown and getting more and more things back to normal, and also allow the vaccinated ones to increase their mobility, not even within the country, but also traveling abroad. And this is what we can expect for the whole situation, for example, in Europe and later on, hopefully soon in many other countries. And And the general idea would be, if we will win the competition, this race with the virus, then there will be the existing variants will be kept under control by the existing vaccines. And then we can also open the children and adolescents for vaccination in, let's say, the nearer future. And then we can transfer the vaccine against the coronavirus to the childhood vaccination programs. So, for example, vaccination against tetanus, diphtheria, measles, rubella, and so on. And this will be augmented by the coronavirus vaccination. And this means that we always vaccinate the immune naive ones that will be born in the future and have to get vaccination against different infectious diseases, vaccine preventable diseases, and then the corona or COVID-19 will also be a vaccine preventable infectious disease. And this would be a very good scenario then, everything under control. However, if there are more variants and the coverage of the existing vaccines will decrease or will not be complete anymore, then we have to revaccinate, perhaps in the same manner as we do that for seasonal influenza, so that we adapt the vaccines, very easy to do for mRNA-based vaccines, and then we revaccinate the different populations, which is, of course, a big thing because it's expensive and so on, but it would be our tool to avoid another pandemic within a pandemic or even a pandemic after the first one. But I'm very confident that we will see decreasing the virus, use this virus, which you can keep under control by normal vaccination.
Thank you, Timo. There is two questions, I think, from Abdel Jawad. Do you want to read your question, Abdel Jawad?
I have really two questions. My first question, thank you very much, Professor Orlíš, for this presentation. My first question, can we reach herd immunity if the vaccine doesn't protect from transmission? And my second question is to improve and update the vaccines to make them efficacious against the new variants. There is something like original antigenic sin. Is that a problem of non-genetic vaccines, or how do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for these two very interesting questions. So, first question will be to keep this under control. So perhaps I start with the original antigenic sin situation, because this is something that I heard the first time in these days. So, and I'm dealing with immunology, let's say, for a longer period of time, and this antigenic sin
antigen erbsünde. Antigen erbsünde.
Yes. So the basic idea of this original antigenic sin is you vaccinate against the coronavirus, and then there will be a new variant spreading, and your immune system will always be prepared to react as it was trained by the vaccination. So always towards the same antigenic domains. And if there are new domains, then it will not adapt to these new domains in a way that a naive immune system could learn much more easier and get a much more efficient immune response in comparison to the vaccinated ones, because the vaccination will direct the immune response only in one way. This is the basic idea. But this is not true. This is just a theory. And if you just look at the seasonal influenza vaccination, you can see that our immune system is not so, let's say, rigid, but it is more plastic, more dynamic. and can adapt in a very fast way. And this is, by the way, the pathogenic strategy of HIV. So a much higher rate of mutations, and will, even after one replication cycle, it looks completely different. And the immune system has to readapt to these newly looking HIV viruses, and then exhausting the whole immune response, because it has to readapt and adapt again, cycle by cycle. And but it can do so, and it is able to really adapt and fine-tune the immune response in a very good way. You have in the influenza virus, you have 8 segments of the whole genome, and these segments are, let's say, mixed in an animal over the year, and then there is a new expression of surface antigens, resulting in, let's say, not a completely, but a slightly altered picture of how the influenza virus will look in the next season. And then vaccinate with the seasonal vaccine, then you can really redirect the immune response towards this new, let's say, variant of the influenza virus. So this is possible. Now that I answered this, I forgot your first question. Could you please repeat?
The first question, if we can reach herd immunity if the vaccines doesn't protect from transmission.
Oh yeah, right. Also very interesting question. So what we see so far is that we have some infection outbreaks in different settings. For example, in homes for the elderly, so nursing homes, where people live like 80 or 90 years old, you sometimes see some infections spread among the already infected individuals. And this can be reduced to one spreader, for example, some people coming from outside. And what cannot be done, or has not so far been reported, is that an infected and vaccinated individual can transmit easily the coronavirus. So it is always imported from an from an unvaccinated but infected individual to some people, elderly people, whose immune system is already weak. And this can happen, but we tremendously reduce the ability for a viral spread by vaccination. Some countries that are already very far in vaccinating the population can report that we have a decrease of the viral spread only by vaccination. This is good news, and then we can also reach herd immunity, even with some infections among the vaccinated individual.
Thank you, Timo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. I give the last chance to ask for Dr. Mariam. She wants to have a question. Dr. Mariam?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. My question is just regarding what you mentioned about we have vaccine to cover everybody in the world. We just need to distribute them. Do you mean this is outside the COVAX? Because as far as I am aware, low middle income countries are struggling to get the vaccine first and then cover the cost of the vaccine. So are we talking, do you mean number of vaccination doses, or you are also including the operation details?
Yeah, so this statement was based on the information that we have for, let's say, our vaccination. So we have much more than we really need.
Timo, we lost your voice.
Oh, sorry. Is it now better?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just repeat. So indeed, Mariam, you are completely right. If you just look at what is available already in the system, this is far too less right now. But Germany and European Union ordered much more vaccine doses than they really need. So we will have some unused vaccines, and lots of them, after having completed our vaccination programs. And we should, and this is what I really would give free, these portions or these parts of our complete orders we will receive now step by step, already now for the COVAX, very rapid transfer to other countries. This is also in our own interest in order to avoid the emergence of new variants.
Thank you, Timo. There is another question, says, is one dose of vaccine enough to prevent recurrence of infection?
Yeah, good question. If you just look at the vector-based vaccines, then you can answer this question with yes. Even with AstraZeneca, you already have a very good protection after the first vaccination, because even AstraZeneca tried to follow up the strategy just with one dose to reach already complete protection. But later on in their development process, they decided, well, we better do 2 shots in order to be on the safe side. And the whole clinical testing, so the clinical phases 1, 2, 3, were just performed testing for 2 vaccinations. And Johnson & Johnson just followed the other strategy, just to look at the clinical situation if you only vaccinate once, with some success, as you know. So this is already also a good vaccine and on the market. And we have the first data from the United States where it is already administered. It has, by the way, the same very rare side effects, namely this thrombotic events. But this was expectable because it is a vaccine very similar to the one from AstraZeneca. And now we know that even after one dose, you have good protection. Also, our data just confirm that you have protection in the sense that you can still get the disease, you can get the infection, not the COVID-19 disease, after having received the first vaccine.
Yeah. Another question is related to the mRNA. Yeah, related to the mRNA vaccine. Does this vaccine get through the placenta? Can we give them to pregnant women at risk? And
so also a question. Yeah. So regardless the producer or whether it is a vector-based or mRNA-based vaccine, from an immunological point of view, it should not make a difference. And giving it to pregnant women should not be a problem. So you have a vaccination during pregnancy. So the immune system is, of course, a bit decreased in its activity because there is the growth of a new organism, not in order to abort it. But the immune system is, of course, able to get trained against the coronavirus, and the produced antibodies, IgGs, are able to get transferred into the blood system of the unborn, and would also then be newborn after birth. So this is what we would expect. But our Commission for Vaccine Questions does not, because we do not have enough data on it, but in immunology, you would not expect any side or adverse effects.
Okay, thank you very much, Timo, for your time. And I think we reached to the end of our event today. And I thank all the participants. And I will move I give the floor to Dr. Hamoud. Hamoud, please.
خلص أقلق يا شكري أنت.
خلص أغلق أنت.
Vielen Dank. Thank you very much, Timo, for the very interesting lessons. شكرا جزيلا لكم جميعا. إن شاء الله تعالى اللقاء هذا سوف يتم إن شاء الله تعالى إنزاله على الرابط خلال الأسبوع إن شاء الله تعالى، نرجو ذلك. نتمنى لكم شهرا مبارك إن شاء الله تعالى، وربنا يحفظكم جميعا، وإن شاء الله تعالى اللقاءات مستمرة، وسوف يتم الإعلان عن اللقاء القادم خلال الأيام القادمة. ولكم جزيل الشكر. Thank you very much, Timo. في beenden.
تسلموا يا دكتور حمود، تسلموا، شكرا جزيلا لكم جميعا.
عليكم إن شاء الله تعالى.